6:30. Are we all ready to go? Everybody ready?
Carrie's ready.
Okay, Carrie's ready. All right, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and begin our annual tax rate hearing. If you'll join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Nikki, would you please call roll?
Mrs. Hopper. Here. Ms. Mount Franklin. Here. Mr. Reedy.
Here.
Mr. Schindler.
Here.
Mr. Seltzer.
Here.
Mr. Spector.
Here.
Mr. Todd.
I'm here. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the agenda for the Board of Education tax rate hearing as scheduled for September 25th, 2024?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So first on our agenda is the hearing on the proposed 24-25 tax rate. So Carrie Nunn, welcome to your very first tax rate hearing here in Parkway.
It is, right. It's my very first one, so I'm very glad to be here. Thanks, guys. All right, so welcome. We're going to start off by talking about Parkway's assessed evaluation. So I'd like to remind you that it is an even tax year, so that means it is a non-reassessment year. So it is, you may see in the total AV a few percentage increase, and that's pretty common. It's mostly contributed to new construction or personal property, but you would not see a significant increase in a non-reassessment year. So we're just going to get started by going through each property class. So we'll start with our residential property class first. We had a $12.8 million increase from the prior year, which equates to a 0.3% increase from the 2023 tax year. Moving down, we have our agricultural property class. We had a significant decrease in this area, 59%. When I reached out to the assessor's office, I was told this is related to some property that was sold and will come back to us through assessed value in a different property class in new construction. Next, we have our commercial property class, which had an increase of $63.5 million, or a 4.88% increase from 2023. Lastly, we have our personal property class, which had a decrease of $14.7 million, which equates to a 1.76% decrease in the AV from the prior year. And that can be associated with people selling their property. So it could be, hey, I no longer want this RV, I no longer want this boat. And it can also be true resetting of the market. So if you guys remember how hard it was maybe to find a car just a few years ago, or how much more expensive used cars were, it is starting to level out. So some of those market values are going back down to what they used to be. They're not quite there yet, but there is a decrease in that. So that gives us this year, for the 2024 tax year, $6.4 billion in total assessed value for Parkway. So now let's dive in next to what is the change, that $60.5 million change from the prior year. What are the components of that? So the primary component is new construction. So you'll find that in the residential property class, we did have $28.3 million in new construction. And with the commercial property class, we had $16.9 million in new construction, which gave us a total of $45.2 million in new construction. So the remaining portion of that change was related to existing property, which was $15.2 million. And so how you can gain assessed value in existing property is, we finished our basement, we added a garage, things that will add value to your home, but not classify it as new construction. This next chart shows what each property class, their makeup over the total AV. So our largest property class is our residential property class. It represents 66% of our total AV in Parkway. Our next largest property class is the commercial, and it represents 21%. And then we have our personal property at 13% of the total AV. And then we have agriculture, which says 0% right there. It's very, very small. The percentage is actually 0.00012. So it is a significantly small part of our total assessed value. So now that we've talked about assessed value, next we're going to talk about the rates. And so how the rates are set is the state auditor sends us a calculator every year, and then we put different components in there, assessed value being one of them, and then it gives us recommended rates that we should levy for the district. We do have some ways that we can adjust that rate, with one of them being a voluntary rollback. So I am recommending for the 2024 tax year that we do have a residential voluntary rollback of 0.1534, which gives the residential taxpayers a approximate value or savings of $6.5 million. This 0.1534 would be a reduction to the residential rate. And a reminder, when we do a voluntary rollback in a non-reassessment year, that rolls forward to the next year too. So this rollback would be reducing the residential rate for the 24 year as well as the 2025 tax year. The other component that we can utilize to have some adjustments to the tax rate is through recoupment. So recoupment is a calculation that allows the school district to recoup lost revenue due to protested tax settlements. The district can choose to collect that recoupment as part of their current tax levy. We can defer it for 3 years, or we can choose not to collect on it at all. So the first 3 lines on this show our available recoupment, with those years correlating to when the recoupment calculation was done, not necessarily the tax year. So in the 2022 tax year, the calculation for recoupment, the available revenue that is still available from that calculation is $1.1 million. For the 2023 calculation, the available revenue is $559,000, and the new recoupment 2024 calculation is $5.1 million, which gives us a total of $6.7 million that could be recouped this year if we chose to levy it. So if we were to break that recoupment down into the different property classes, we would have the residential, we could potentially recoup $2.4 million. Agriculture, we could recoup $450. For commercial, we could recoup $4.3 million, and for personal property, we could recoup $2,000 for, again, that grand total of $6.7 million potential recoupment revenue we could levy if we chose to. I am recommending what we levy. So again, the first 3 lines is what is our available recoupment, which is the $6.7 million. I am recommending that we levy for the agricultural $448, which would increase the rate for agricultural property class by 0.0562. For the commercial property, I am recommending that we collect $3.9 million, which would increase that tax levy rate of 0.2881, which would give us a grand total of $3.9 million that we would collect from recoupment, and would adjust our blended tax rate, increase it by 0.0611. And you'll see later on, I'm recommending that we move all of that to our capital project fund. So now that we have talked about those rates, this is what they would actually, after we take those into consideration, the ways we could adjust the rate, I put that into the calculator, and then the state auditor's calculator comes up with these rates. So these rates are truly just our operating revenue, our operating levy rates. So they do not reflect our debt service. So our debt service is 0.49%, and we will see that on the next chart. But I do want to point out on this chart, the first one is 2024, the second column is 2023, and then that fourth column there represents the change. And so you will see by each property class how the rate is changing. So in residential, there's a slight increase of 0.0771. For agriculture, there's an increase of 2.3295, which seems significant, but that is also because we had the significant decrease in assessed value for that property class as well. Then we have a commercial slight increase of 0.0773, and then a slight increase in personal property of 0.001, which gives us a grand total change from the prior year of 0.0788. But this chart is truly what will be levied to each property class, because this reflects also the debt service, which again is 0.4900. So my recommendation for 2024 rates for each property class would be residential, 3.3654, agricultural, 4.6322, commercial, 5.1907, personal property, 4.2609, which gives us a blended rate of 3.8673. Now here I do want to let you guys know, because I think it's something we should be very proud of as a district, is we have the lowest residential rate in St. Louis County, and there's 22 school districts. So of 22 school districts, we are the lowest. So even with these very slight increases, we're still going to maintain that ranking. And when in regards to our blended rate, again, out of 22 school districts, we are the 4th lowest of the blended rate. So I think that's something we should be proud of, and I think that's something we will maintain even with this slight increase. So now that we have those rates, how will we move those rates or allocate them to the different funds that we have in our school? So we have 4 different funds. Every school district has these. 4 different funds. So I recommend for the general fund that we levy we allocate 1.1607 of our blended rate to the general fund. General fund can be used for non-certified salaries and benefits, supplies, and materials. So for the special or teachers fund, I recommend that we allocate 2.1555 of the blended rate to that fund, and that funds can only be used for teacher salary and benefits. For our capital projects, I recommend that we allocate 1.0611, and if you'll remember prior, that was the total recoupment value. So I recommend that we put that all in our capital fund. Capital fund are funds that can be used for non-PROPES, like non-bond projects. So those would be things like when we go to buy our buses, or we go to resurface our tennis courts like we just did this year. And then lastly, we have our debt service, which that is the 0.49, and all of those funds go towards paying off our GeoBond debt. So again, that gets us back to our 3.8673 blended tax rate. So now that we have those rates, what does that actually equate to in revenue? This represents the revenue that those rates would collect and that we would allocate to each fund. The first column, it says 100%. So if everyone paid their tax bill and they paid it on time and everything went smooth in a perfect world with unicorns and rainbows, that would be the amount that we would collect. But we know historically that's not true. We have a typical collection rate of around 95 to 96%. So this we anticipate to collect on the 95.5%. So that means that for our special fund, we expect to generate revenue of $132.6 million. For general, we anticipate $71.4 million. For capital, $3.8 million. For debt service, $30.4 million, which gets us a grand total of $238 million for the 2024 tax bill revenue generation. So those are some large numbers. So what does that mean to a homeowner? Let's take that down to an individual level and what they can anticipate. First, I'd like to talk about where we've been for the residential rate. So this is a chart for the last 10 years of just our residential assessed value and rate. So as you can see, back from starting in 2015 onward, our assessed value has been increasing at every time there was an assessment year. And as the assessments increased, we also decreased our rate. So what does that mean for an actual tax bill? So this is a sample of of an average homeowner. So there's 2 years here, and you'll see that the market value and the assessed value hasn't changed. because again, 2024 is not a reassessment year. So though we would anticipate the average homeowner to not have any increases in their assessed value. I'd also like to point out that market value of $356,900 is the true median value of the home in Parkway. I was able to get that from the assessor's office. And so you'll see that when you average that out with that slight tax rate increase, the average taxpayer from the prior year of 2023 will have a 2.2% increase to their tax bill, which equates to about $54. So, all right. Do you guys have any questions?
Carrie, I'm sorry, can you go back to your last slide?
Absolutely.
It's different than what we have in the.
Yeah.
It's just
okay.
different numbers.
That's an updated.
It is.
Okay.
So the reason why it is different is because I was able to get that number from the assessor's office. So I was able to put the market value in there correctly. And then I originally had increased the car by CPI. And then the more I thought about that, I was like, no one's gonna probably have an increase into their car value unless they go out and get a new car. So you would more likely have a flat car value.
Okay.
So I did change those two numbers.
All right.
And pass the savings along to the homeowners.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Carrie, the commercial is healthier than maybe what we thought. 'Cause I think
Yes.
your predecessor was cautioning us that there may be some decreases, but the commercial looks pretty healthy at this
Yeah,
point.
it had, it did have some significant commercial new construction increase, but yes, it is healthy. It had a $60.5
Yeah,
million AV increase, yeah.
And did I hear correctly, the tax bills now will be going out in the mail and?
Yes, they have funded the tax bills, so the taxpayer will receive their tax bills in the mail, because that was there for a while. We weren't sure if they were going to fund that, it was basically the postage that we weren't sure if they were going to fund, but they have decided to do that.
Okay.
Which is good.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Well done. So next up, we have an opportunity for public comments. And we just have one speaker, and I will just state that we'd ask you to be mindful that the meetings of the board, including your statements at the podium, are broadcast, and that you're responsible for any public comments you make. In lieu of and/or in addition to a public statement, you may choose to submit your comments to the board in writing. Also, due to the time constraints and the need to complete the primary responsibilities of our meeting agenda, we cannot respond during the meeting, so you will receive a response from us in writing. As I mentioned, we have only one speaker, and I'll do my best here, Raditya Argawala. If you'd like to join us at the podium. Okay. Okay, all right, thank you very much. So then we have nothing further in this meeting agenda, so may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the annual tax rate hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. We will be back.